Hello everyone and welcome to Real History. As you can see, we are not in our typical home studio. I'd say this is about the best backdrop that we've ever filmed against. And what Andy and I have been doing for the last 2 weeks is that we have been following in the footsteps of the Band of Brothers. We have been graced by the presence of two of the actors from the series as well. And one of them is joining us right now on Real History, and that is Ross McCall, who played the character of Leib God in the iconic HBO series, which I know so many of you love. Ross, thank you so much for joining us.
Welcome to my home.
Yes, this is awesome. I absolutely love it.
This is like a Zoom backdrop. Don't be fooled.
We are sitting at the Grand Hotel, Zelensee, Austria, which was actually regimental headquarters for a time for the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment. So Colonel Sink himself could have been thrown back if you were here on this very balcony.
Could have been on this balcony. There could be a rumor.
We have a few questions for you, and I know you and all the actors who were involved in this have done a lot of interviews, and you've shared your thoughts, and you've done travels, and you've interacted with the veterans and their families, and so I did my utmost to think of some questions that perhaps you haven't received over the years.
We will see.
Let's dive right in.
Yeah, do it.
All right.
All right.
What has been the most meaningful interaction, do you think? There's a lot of fans of Band of Brothers. What's one of the most meaningful interactions you've had with one of them amidst all the tours, all the travels, all the speaking engagements and reunions that you've participated in?
Yeah, sure. It's relatively easy to answer, really. With our job, people know you from different shows, right? And they tend to have different reactions to different characters that you play. So, I'll be going through an airport and there'll be a fan of another show that I did. It's vastly different from Band. And I think the reason Band is so... there's a difference in, it's not fandom, it's not celebrity, it's people that are coming up to you with tears in their eyes, almost, and they're either saying, the ones that have always stuck with me are people who will say, I managed to convince my dad or my grandpa to finally watch the show. And when he did, he opened up. And he told us the stories. And as soon as I hear that the show had an influence on a family member such as that, for them to open up and divulge their stories and their experiences to the family, that means the world to me. But also I've had men and women who serve in the military come over, and I always know the look on their face, and they'll proceed to tell me that they've watched this show on a tiny little monitor in a tent in Afghanistan for 6 months straight, day after day, and usually with our career path, in our industry, you go, oh wow, that's great, but it's important. That it's not about a vanity watch, it's not about celebrity watch, it's not about that. It's about people really connecting to this show that changed people's lives, and it's an immense honor for me and all the fellas to have this legacy that we get to carry around, and so that's why we do what we do.
There's so many great layers of historical context associated with the show, not only in regard to its original content, but the legacy, the generations of meaning that it has had for so many viewers. Now, one of the perhaps challenges that you confronted as an actor is that Joe Leib God had already passed away by the time this film was going into production, and you never had the opportunity to meet with him or converse with him in the way that so many of the other actors did. How did you fill that void? Did you talk with other veterans who were still alive to pull stories from them? I'm interested in, because it's not only a methodology question, it's a research question as well. So how did you go about that work?
Well, first of all, I think there was a part of me that was kind of, at a loss to begin with, because I only had the book to go on. Those who have read the book and those who've seen the series, various men in the book didn't show up as strongly in the series, and vice versa. And so Leib God is throughout the book, obviously, but there wasn't much in terms of knowledge apart from a few photographs here and there, a little bit about who he was as a character. And so I was handed a manila envelope with one picture, blown up picture, and it was the same picture that was in the book. And I remember kind of, finding a little bit of humor in that, because I could have photocopied the book, there's no research here. But everybody was excited because they're all getting these packages, they're all getting these, pamphlets and binders full of information, of letters and communications these men had been having with people, and I had nothing. I had a picture. But in one way, that turns out to be a favorable thing for an actor, especially when you're dealing with men such as these, because they don't like talking about themselves. So a lot of the guys who could lean on their men, they were getting information, but perhaps not as deep as you would want it to be, because they don't talk about themselves, but they'll talk about their buddies. And so I quickly caught on to that, and so I knew that I had various men at the end of a phone call. And what was incredible was, very early on, they started attaching themselves to the likes of me, and they'd call me Joe, and they were sort of starting to lean on that a little bit, like I was their pal, because we were told also, and this is pre world changing internet. It was little bits of dial-up and stuff, but it wasn't world-changing internet. So even the research that the writers and producers had, we'd lost touch with the Leib God family. We were told he passed away at, various different. We never had like a solidified answer on what date he actually passed on. So we didn't have a lot to go on. And so for these guys, I know they hadn't seen or heard of Joe for years, and they were almost leaning on me for that, which was an immense pressure, but also a complete and utter honor, and so I could lean on the men, and I could say, how was he? Did he do this? How did he do it? And they would tell me stuff that will, remain between us. That was our chat, but they allowed it to open up this plethora of information for me, which allowed me to dig deeper, and probably deeper than I would have had I have had a whole bunch of information given by the producers. So it worked in my favor in many ways.
Speaking of filling the gaps, I'm wondering, were there any notable scenes that were cut from the series, or anything that you think should have been included that ultimately wasn't?
For me, that's my car arriving. Get up in front. No, in a sentence, in a word, I'll give you a sentence. There was one tiny little bit that I remember shooting, which did not make the series, which was in episode 9 in Why We Fight, and it was an exterior of Landsberg, and there was a plaque outside that the Germans had built, basically saying nice things about their boss, and we hated that, and I think I don't even remember the scene, but I remember it involved us kind of being very angered at this dedication, and I think I ended up spitting on the monument myself, and I remember it just being a small little bit, and that never made the series, and I guess it just probably didn't need to be there, but other than that, no, I don't think so. I think everything that was on paper was there. There was a few things that were added as the show went along. There were more moments coming in that they were still trying to clear up the historical facts. But yeah, in an answer, no.
Thinking of other stories on set, can you think of a particularly dangerous or precarious moment on set? I mean, there's a bunch of pyrotechnics, things like that. Did anything nearly ever go wrong, or anything along those lines?
It's fascinating. Somebody, I get a lot of questions, and they're like, what happens in like Bastogne? When you guys are all, running through the Bojac? Was that dangerous and whatnot? And yeah, I mean, you look at it now, and it was insanely dangerous. However, the stunt team would lead you, because we did everything ourselves, right? Apart from, there's a few tiny little important stunts that the team would come in and do, but primarily they would ask us to do it. And so they would put little bits of tape up on a pathway that you would be running. They're like, this will explode, this will explode, this will explode, this will go off. You got it? And you're like, all right, all done. You're rehearsing it and quickly having a look. Yeah, got it, great. And then they take the tape away. So you'd be like, let's see how this goes. And remarkably, the only injury I'm aware of, my perception of it, the only injury was in Crossroads, episode 5. And it's when we all fixed bayonets. and somebody, and I know who it was, he will remain nameless, slipped, because it was a wet day, but slipped as we're coming out of the ditch. And as he slipped, the bayonet kind of sliced into the guy next to him, just here, just on the and that was it. I mean, he was lucky he didn't take his eye out, but thank God that was it. And the medics came in and checked him out, and it was fine. It was literally a little, it was more than a scratch. I mean, it sliced his underneath, but that was the only thing, which is remarkable. Because we're all taking, hot rounds down the back of the neck, but you sort of, you got used to that and threw it away. And, but yeah, nobody tweaked an ankle, nobody got hurt.
Well, as you've attested to, the best of the best.
It was the best of the best
in every category.
Indeed.
So I think that's a true testament
we had,
to the production.
Yeah. I mean, Powell was running our stunt team, and he's arguably one of the best in the world, and he has the utmost safety, points all taken care of. And the whole production was that. There was no way anybody was going to get hurt on this.
Episode 9, Why We Fight, is a particularly important one for your character.
Sure.
And so many of most of the actors didn't see the set until you went there that day.
Correct.
What was your visceral gut reaction? What was going through your mind the first time you walked in there?
Well, I was in deep research mode for 9. Look, everybody who knows me knows this. I'm a Scotsman with an English accent playing an American who speaks German, right? I'm also a Catholic, and Leib God, portrayed in the show, is Jewish, and I really wanted to lean into the faith. I wanted to find out as much as I could, information of just stuff I was not aware of. I was reasonably educated, so I knew about the goings-on throughout the war. And I think that was the risk for us was, you are going in knowing what this is, but Easy Company had no idea what the camps were when they showed up, right? So there was talk about me going to visit a camp and doing a memorial site before we shot. I declined it because I wanted to have what you're talking about. I wanted to try and find that gut reaction of, what is this? Nobody knows what it is. They invited us all up to the set. Everybody declined, I believe. Because we wanted the cameras to roll and just have that first initial reaction. And it was twofold, I remember being in the deuce and a half and going up, and one, talking about having the best of the best. Our production designers and our set designers were, it was outstanding. Mm-hmm. There wasn't a fiber that was out of place. Incredibly real. It was real. So I defy anybody to be able to not have a gut reaction to something so horrific and atrocious and realistic as that was. So it was a tough 4 or 5 day shoot in that set. Everybody had the utmost respect. It was a very quiet 4 days. Mm-hmm. 3-4 days, I don't remember which. But it affected everybody in the way it was supposed to. So it meant a great deal that they went to such lengths to really. Something I love about the show. It's there. You see this place for what it was, but there's a real great education there as well. Mm-hmm. As heartbreaking as it is, it's great. It opens the eyes up for people who haven't been able to go visit a memorial site to be able to see it. Mm-hmm,
absolutely. Well, that's a good segue for a question from one of our viewers. How did experiences like that allow you to grow as an actor?
The Band of Brothers in a whole changed my life. Changed my life as an actor. And changed my life, I guess. I'd been working a long time as a kid. In the UK, I had a lot of success. I always wanted to work on American projects. American movies was my goal. America was my goal. There aren't many auteurs bigger than the likes of Spielberg and Hanks. I always had a dream to work with them both. So when it was coming up, I knew it was a big opportunity. However, from day one, I also knew that there was a legacy here to protect. And I really took it seriously. All the men did. I'm not alone in that. Everybody, you're playing a real person. and you're playing a real man that has seen some stuff that we hope we would never have to see. And so it changed my outlook on, not necessarily as being an actor. I lived with Leib God for 2-3 years. I wore his dog tags for 2 years, and that wasn't out of vanity, out of just trying to be a military actor guy. That was because I was a part of him and he was a part of me. And so it just opened my whole world up as an actor, because I went, wow, you can really, we joke about this a lot, actors, filmmakers, we're not brain surgeons, but the truth is, we do something that, a movie is escapism for people. And something like Band of Brothers, people knew the real men that we were portraying, and they've sort of clung to that, like a lot of the fan base that we have. I mean, they see us as easy company. We're not, and we will never ever, but it's our honor to be able to wave that flag and go, listen, if you can't get to them, then sure, we'll do it our way. So I mean, it was a big eye-opening experience for me. It's something that changed my life completely.
And on that point, you and all the actors have remained incredibly close.
Yep.
All these years later. And I was thinking, amidst our travels, a really great way to put you all back together again is possibly making a small follow-up movie that is set during an Easy Company reunion in the 1960s or the 1970s.
I look forward to reading that script.
Maybe you and Jimmy Matteo can write it together.
You're pitching me right now.
Uh-huh.
All right. I like it.
But given the fan base that you just mentioned, and given the lives that they lived after the war, you can't tell me that people wouldn't love to see something like that.
Sure, but I think that there is that legacy I'm talking about. There's something we're very protective about.
Yeah.
So I get it. And yes, it would be.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But there's something about the fact those reunions were so private for those men. They didn't allow Dr. Ambrose in to begin with. Eventually they let him in, because he was vouched for. It's the same as our reunions. We do reunions every year.
Sure.
We don't let anyone in. And occasionally...
That's fascinating.
Occasionally a few people have sort of managed to, sneak in a ticket here and there. And we're all a bit like, well, welcome, because we're all nice, normal people, but we're also like, what are you doing here? So as wonderful as that would be, sure, I mean, if somebody were to write something, but my initial reaction would be, we protect that legacy with everything we got. That was for the men to enjoy. That was for them to tell their stories.
That's fair enough.
Maybe that's where we leave it for now.
That's fair enough.
Unless Stephen and Tom change that and decide.
I mean, if Tom's watching, I would be happy to talk with you on that point. But no, I think it is a perfect miniseries, and perhaps it is the perfect ending, and maybe it should be just left there. We'll leave it to all you to decide. Ross, thank you so much for joining us.
It was my pleasure. I had a blast with you all.
All right, wonderful.
I hope the wind wasn't too crazy and we're like, blown all over and I'm holding microphones and stuff.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of Real History. Until we see you next time, stay curious.